Welcome back to Personal Finance for Us. I'm still hiding out in the basement. Help me. So the subject of today's video is Dave Ramsey's plan any good? Are the baby steps any good? Did I follow the baby steps? So some people argue that the baby steps don't work. They'll say it's not possible, that's a part of life. Full disclosure, I didn't follow the baby steps to a T. I did more or less what he would call Dave Ramsey-ish, to be perfectly honest, but overall, the plan absolutely, positively does work. And there's a couple of things that I think for some people can be tweaked. However, really, I mean, hey, the dude's been a personal finance coach for almost as long as I've been alive. Who am I to tell him that his plan doesn't work? Who am I to change his plan? Keeping that in mind, I do think that when you're talking to a very broad audience, and in his case, like all of America, when you're talking to a broader audience, you definitely need to make sure things are super duper simple enough for everyone to follow with no real room for exceptions. So that doesn't mean that there couldn't be some exceptions. So I'll let you guys know a few of the things that I tweaked and some things that maybe you can consider tweaking. It just kind of depends on where you are in your financial journey. Or you could not tweak anything and do the steps just as he lays them out. I don't think you lose either way. One thing I would change, particularly for people with tighter margins, like those single parents out there, and your kids are relying solely on your income and things might be a little tight some months, it may not be a bad idea for you to have a little bit more than $1,000 in your starter emergency fund, just because you're it. Maybe if you have a really good family support, or you can rely on public transportation, something like that, maybe you can still get away with $1,000. But if you don't have a backup family car, a mechanic friend in the family, and you absolutely positively need a car to get to work, it may not be a bad idea for you to have a little bit more than $1,000, maybe more like $2,000 or $2,500 for backup, just in case of an emergency. And I say that because a car repair in itself may not be an emergency if you can hitch a ride with somebody to work, for example. But if you're in a situation where you don't live near anybody, or maybe everybody is kind of in the same boat as you, if you truly are on an island, it may not be a bad idea to have a little bit more than $1,000. That being said, most car repairs are still going to be just under that $1,000 mark. It just kind of depends, again, on your situation, what kind of car you're driving, etc. One thing you could change with baby step number 2 is doing the debt avalanche instead of the debt snowball. The thing about the debt snowball is, as Dave points out himself over and over again, the debt snowball takes on psychology. You get quick wins, so you keep going. And that's why the snowball is so effective. Now, on a purely mathematical note, you could do, again, the debt avalanche. The debt avalanche is arranging your debts in the order of the largest interest rate to the smallest interest rate, and then paying them off that way. You'll pay off the debt faster because you're attacking that highest interest rate debt first. So it works, it's very quick, but it is purely mathematical because it can be a little bit of a grind because that interest rate keeps popping on. Like, you make a $100 payment and then you pay $90 of interest, so it can be a little bit more of a grind. You do definitely need to throw as big a chunk of money at that first couple of debts as you can. The second thing is your highest interest rate debt may not be your lowest balance, so you might be hammering away at that first debt for a good little while. Let's be honest, for most people, the reason why we're in consumer debt in the first place is because we were not able to delay gratification. We wanted it, or at least told ourselves we needed it now. So with that being in the back of your mind, you gotta say, well, some quick wins is probably going to be good for our psychology. Now, if you are in consumer debt just because you didn't know any better, but you are fairly good at delaying gratification, and you are patient, and you are a bit of a stubborn bull about it, then yeah, the debt avalanche can absolutely work for you. The third thing I think you can do, what I certainly did differently from the baby steps the way they are laid out, is if you do have savings, dropping everything down to $1,000 and attacking debt. I didn't do that really simply because I worked out the math and realized that I would be pretty much at the same place that I started, but I was down to my last debt. My husband and I were paying off the car. We were putting big extra payments down on it, working extra. We were kind of down to the wire, so I didn't deem it really necessary to go ahead and empty it out. We did take a big chunk of our savings out and put it towards the car, but we didn't pay it all off like we could have. For those of you that don't know, Dave uses the expression gazelle intensity, with the intensity and vigor you should be trying to get out of debt. Admittedly, by that point, we weren't so gazelle intense, but we were on track. We knew where we were going, so we just kept pressing forward, and we paid the car off in a couple of months, and then we built that savings right back up. So if your margins are a bit larger, you can probably get away with not necessarily hammering down. And if your margins are larger and you aren't carrying that much debt to begin with. Now, if you are making $50,000 and you've got $80,000 in student loans, and you've got a $20,000 car payment and all these other things and have run up credit cards, yeah, you should probably go ahead and get out of debt as quickly as possible in those instances, because your debt is just way higher than your annual income. I would go ahead and throw that money at the debt, so that way you can get out of there before you get exhausted and feel beat down. The fourth and final thing that maybe I would tweak a little bit differently, that I actually am doing a little bit differently, full disclosure, and that many other people out there could maybe get away with, is not being in a too big of a hurry to pay off the house. Why do I say that, and what do I mean specifically? So, full disclosure, Dave never ever says that you should pay off the house with that same gazelle intensity that you've gotten out of your consumer debt with. A mortgage is a big chunk of debt, and for most people, other than this student loan crisis, it's going to be the biggest debt you take on in your life. Most people can probably pay, once you're debt free, can pay those mortgages off in better than 15 years. It's still our plan to do that, but if we were really held off on investing, we probably could pay ours off in 6 years, but we're probably going to shoot for 10. Why? Well, mortgage rates are historically low right now. Historically low. Once upon a time, they were 10, 11, 12%. We are at 3%. Some people have even locked in like a 2.7% mortgage. It's kind of hard to justify going ahead and slamming down that mortgage when you know you could invest it. So that's kind of where we are right now. We will likely kind of split the difference on this a little bit, so we'll still be paying some extra money towards the mortgage, but investing actually more money than what we're using to pay the mortgage down with. The other thing that is kind of in the back of my mind is I really want to retire early. Now, obviously a paid off house will assist with that, but it's not going to make a huge deal to have the house paid off in 5 years versus 10, simply because I'm not terribly far away from 40 years old, so it just kind of makes more sense to me anyway to get that compound interest going for me, and then worry about the house a little bit later once that nest egg gets built up. So those are 4 things I think you could tweak in Dave's plan if maybe you thought it made more sense for you to do so. Now, as I've said, I think Dave's plan is great as it is. However, personal finance is called personal for a reason. So if you can modify something to make it work a little bit better for you and it makes sense to do so, then do so. Otherwise, I really think that the baby steps are fundamental, especially when you consider that the biggest thing is staying out of consumer debt. So many people out there try to convince us that we can use debt to improve our lives, and maybe in a handful of cases, but overall, as Dave says, your most powerful wealth building tool is your income. So if you aren't giving your income to other people, you can give it to yourself. That's it for the video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one. This has been Personal Finance for Us. Peace.